I told her. That dusk would come between 9:30 and 10. As we entered the house, I told her she was the second person I had ever stay in my home. Neither of us knew at that time that she would never leave. I was up before Barbara, Tuesday morning. It still amazes me when I reflect on the morning how refreshed and beautiful she looked as she walked down the stairs. It was as if she had stepped out of the clouds into sunshine. With no makeup on, she oozed of country, dressed in blue jeans with a tank top. She would fit right in. Coffee's in the urn, sleepyhead, I said. Sugar's on the counter, half and half is in the carton in the fridge. And good morning to you too, she replied. Anything new in Charlie's world today? Let's turn on CNN and find out, I said with a smile. I flicked on the TV with the remote as I watched her pour herself a cup, then checked out what was in the fridge and the cupboards. She stated we needed to do a major grocery shopping if she was going to do any cooking. I heard her say to herself, it's a beautiful house, but it needs a woman's touch to change it from the bachelor pad to a home. It reminded me of something my mother would say. CNN was having a field day. After receiving the death certificate, they had discovered that the signature on it was from a doctor who had a questionable past. He was currently serving time. A news crew had been dispatched to the gravesite in an area known to have been used often by the mob. When Barb saw me smiling, she said, "You knew." I had to admit I did. I then said the judge, when he protected himself, set this up long ago. After he died, I inherited his estate in the Caymans. I realized that he was going to make them pay. I had the caretaker mail this information in. She laughed and said that Judy, Joe, and she had spent most of Sunday night and Monday morning discussing everything about the whole situation. They were all in agreement that Joan and James were getting what they deserved. All of you daughters appear to hate what their mother did. Your daughter made it perfectly clear that if I did anything to hurt you, I would be held accountable by her. All three of them think you walk on water. I had to promise Judy daily reports on how we're getting along, Barbara said. When I told her Saturday night what I thought about you after the general had said his little bit, she started to plan. I asked her why she was doing what she was doing, and she said my dad's a good man who needs a good, honest woman in his life. After our coffees, let's drive over to Port so you can get your Washington State driver's license. Apply for your nursing license and do a major grocery shopping if that's okay. They have a Golden Corral there, so we can have an early lunch, I said. Sound like the plan for the day. If we can work in stopping at the hospital so I can go to the Human Resources Department and fill out an official application, she replied, handing me her phone. I need to get you to put our legal address into the memos, so I have it. After stopping for coffee before we got on the road, she asked me if she could drive. I let her, and she had a smile a mile wide. She handled the clutch like she had been doing it all her life. When I said I was surprised at how well she was doing, she told me she had been driving tractors since she was 9. If you're in the country and are not driving a standard, it's like saying that you'll never amount to much. After lunch, we hit the hospital and got that done, then the state local office where she was told her new licenses would arrive within a week. Then Walmart. The groceries we bought filled the truck. We had overloaded it. I hadn't expected the new copper non-stick pots and pans, a complete set of dishes for $12, or the new silverware. Her explanation was that my measly kitchenware showed I just did not cook, which was true. While she was in the hospital's HR department, I had called my insurance provider. So our last stop was at the local Jeep dealership, where I picked up a Jeep 4x4 fully loaded, brand new. My insurance dealer faxed over proof of insurance so we could drive it home. She drove it home, following me all the way. When we got home, she let me unload the groceries, then told me to get out of her way and to leave her alone so she could properly set the kitchen up. As soon as the Dawn dishwater soap was unpacked, it was used. She washed down every cabinet before she unpacked a single thing. It was as if she was setting up a new house. I watched her in amazement as she organized the kitchen, making it her own. I should have seen the warning signs, but I was blind. I went into the living room and turned on the news. If it wasn't so sad, I would have laughed. They had found my gravesite and were asking if I was alive, who was buried there. It would take the FBI to answer that. I heard Barbara's cell phone ring and I listened and was able to glean that it was Judy getting an update. So, I yelled, "Tell Judy you haven't assaulted me yet." Barb did, and then yelled back, "Your daughter says you can be a real a-hole." I laughed. I knew I was too old for her, and that was that. It was almost 10 before she was done. To celebrate, I poured us both a large glass of homemade blackberry wine and watched the twinkling of the town lights below until we went to our separate beds. I awoke to the smell of bacon being fried. When I came down, the coffee was made. Barbara was wearing a homemade full-length housecoat with a matching nightgown. I commented that it was hand-stitched and asked how long it had taken it for her to make it. She said 2 months, but how did you know? I replied, because you can't buy that quality in any store. She smiled and said, I like a man who notices little things. Breakfast was almost ready. 6 pancakes, 3 runny eggs, and 4 slices of bacon for me with warmed pure maple syrup. I asked how you knew that was my favorite. She said, your mother told me, but you can place the eggs on your own pancakes, she laughed. So, I asked her, what else did my mother tell you? She smiled, saying that's for me to know and you to find out. I smiled and said to myself I could get used to this. I told her I was going to check in at the store and pick up the plates when I paid the taxes on the Jeep. She said that was fine because she had found the tape measure in my toolbox in the pantry and was going to measure for blinds and curtains. Before I left, she gave me a kiss on the cheek and said, just remember dinner is at 6 and always will be when I am not working. Then it hit me. She was trying to make this a home, not just a place to sleep. I returned at noon and put the plates on the Jeep before heading inside. Barbara told me the good news: the FBI was digging up my gravesite that very afternoon. We both wondered what they would find. It had been found out that my death certificate had been issued the day before I had re-enlisted. CNN was carrying it live. I received a text from the lawyers asking me to call. It turned out that Joan wanted a quick divorce, and the trust situation dealt with separately. She would not fight the grounds of adultery. They felt if they went that way, the time period for the divorce to be granted would be waived because she was already remarried. I told them to go ahead. Barb said I was making the right move. She said she was done measuring and that we needed to discuss rod-style materials and price. I said, why? She replied, because this town is growing, and it won't be long till there will be other homes built that may allow them a direct view into your home. Also, finishing off the house will add value. For the next 4 hours, we discussed each room and ordered the items online. After spending 10 grand, I asked her if she expected me to hang them when they came in, and she said, yes, that's a man's job, but I will help. She figured she better check in with Judy, and we were glad that she did. Judy had inside knowledge of what the found in the coffin. Wrapped and taped in bubble wrap for protection was a Federal Express sealed envelope. Once it was opened, it contained a note saying, next time, James and Joan, when you try to kill someone, make sure the person you hire is competent. It was signed by me. When I heard that, I roared. When Barb got off the phone, she asked for an explanation. So I told her that before I left to report, the judge had me sign a bunch of blank pages as if I was signing a letter. What they found must have been one of them. Barb was just going to start supper when I got a phone call to let me know all my buddies and their wives were on their way to welcome Barb to the neighborhood. I told her not to bother starting anything because we were about to have a house full. They wanted to welcome Barb to our village and group. Apparently, Connie had spread the word that I had brought a classy lady back with me, and my daughters had approved. All the ladies wanted to meet the lady who had been able to get my attention. They would joke all night that they had to see it to believe it. Charlie had finally found a girlfriend. Within 10 minutes, the group all arrived. I proudly introduced Barb to them all. We were having a potluck dinner, country style. Fried chicken, baked bean, nachos and cheese, potatoes, chips, fries, coleslaw, salad, fresh buns, 2 cases of beer, and pecan pie. All the ladies loved Barb's selection of dishes. After introductions, she soon fit right in, talking with the ladies about the curtains, blinds, and rods she had ordered, saying that they should arrive on Friday. It was decided that Saturday afternoon we would all get together and put them up, but she insisted they bring nothing because she would prepare a meal for us all. Early Thursday morning saw us going to Ace Superstore in Port. Barb wanted a big propane barbecue, a deep oil fryer, and a smoker with the needed tanks. We ended up buying a patio set that would sit 8 with 8 extra chairs and had it arranged to be delivered the next day. I bought pre-cut lumber to build a couple of tables. Friday morning, I started building her an outside cedar table that when collapsed would stand against the back outside wall. When pulled out and being used, it would be used as the main counter for people getting their food. I stained it to match the stain of our log home and protected it in the same way. She loved it. Thank God Ace Hardware pre-assembled it, saved a lot of time. Saturday at noon, they brought their ladders, and the 5 of us guys soon had the rods set up in all the rooms. We let the ladies put the curtains up. I had to admit in front of them all that Barb had a great sense of design and style. That made her smile. What we had done made the house look that much better, and I admitted it. I laughed because Barb blushed. Bill pointed out that I was going to need a garage and a storage room for the patio stuff before the winter weather set in. I had to admit that he was right, but if I was going to do it right, I wanted a protected pathway with a mud room for coats and boots all made with logs. Barb said we need room for 2 freezers. I groaned. Connie caught it and said, "Are you already planning for more kids?" I blushed and everybody roared. Connie said, "Poor Charlie, he's already henpecked and don't know it." Everybody roared again. Barb had smoked and slow-cooked 20 pounds of ribs, had a huge potato salad, and had made a quick shredded pickled cabbage relish in a regular salad. It was a hit with everyone. So all the ladies had to find out how the cabbage was done. To reward her for all her hard work, I made her breakfast on Sunday, then with friends we took a cruise up the coast. Seeing her enjoyment in what we were doing, I made a note to take her to Seattle to do some whale watching and to spend a day at their market. When Judy called Barb, she admitted privately to Judy that she was in love. The problem I was too, but I would never make a move. I was too old, and I saw myself as too set in my ways. It had been an interesting week. We had over 3 evenings designed and laid out the plans. My 4 best friends enjoyed expressing in their banter with me about me being in love. No matter how hard I argued, they knew I held a losing hand. The rock removal company would be coming next week to start leveling off the additional space needed. By the time they were done, we would have the county approval for a 4-bay garage, a built-in storage area in the back with an in-law apartment on top, and a 16-foot walkway to the huge mudroom for Barb. James and Joan had been called into the FBI. Rumor had it that it wasn't going well. The polls had his re-election chances going down the drain. The FBI had shrunk it down to 2 possible suspects who may have been hired to carry out the attempted execution of me. It was difficult for them because of the lack of proof. They both were under investigation. Friday, I got an interesting phone call from the president of the company I had founded. He wanted to know, as a major shareholder, if I would be interested in becoming the new CEO. I asked if I could have a week to think about it. He said yes. Somehow it leaked out and the shares rallied on the news, rising to the level $139. Then late Saturday, a very loud thunderstorm with lightning moved in. I did not know it, but it would cause our relationship to change forever. It hit in the middle of the night. I was laying in my bed listening to the heavy downpour hit my home's metal roof when my bedroom door opened. That was when a huge lightning hit. Barb walked in wearing a very slim, almost see-through low-cut nightie, which barely covered her private parts. She was a sight to behold. Her silhouette with the sheet lightning behind her encased her in a band of gold, giving me a vision of her I would see in my dreams. I pretended to be asleep as she pulled the sheets back and crawled in beside me, her body trembling in fright. As soon as the next thunder boomed, its echo bouncing off the walls, her body was tight against mine. I could smell the sweet scent of fresh soap coming from her body because she had showered before going to bed. The scent of lavender filled my nose. Flesh against flesh gave me an instant hard-on. Turning sideways, she slid her leg over mine, wrapped her arm around my chest, and laid her neck upon my shoulder. I hadn't been this close to a woman in years. I was a nervous wreck. As she raised her head to give me a kiss on the cheek, I turned my head to hers and our lips met. A gentle kiss turned in a slow, lingering tongue-exchanging kiss. Once started, we could not stop. Emotions were fueling our desires, our cold hands exploring each other's bodies, each other's pleasures we sought. It was a night of wonders and whispers as both of us were making up for lost time. It wasn't just sex, we were making love. She was claiming me, marking me, taking my mind, heart, and soul. In the afterglow, we admitted to each other our feelings of love. It was almost 10 a.m. when hunger demanded we get out of bed. I went down and put the coffee on, dressed in just my pajama bottoms. While waiting for it to brew, I called my daughter Judy. "Dad," Judy said with surprise. "It's good to hear your voice." "Thanks, but I need to ask you a question. What did Barb say to you during Jen's wedding?" I asked. "That the moment she saw you in the wedding party, it was love at first sight. It seems the more she learned about you that night, the more it reinforced to her that her feelings were real. She watched you all night. Ever since your arrival back home, she has been on cloud 9. Whatever you planned to do, Dawn, hurt her?" Judy asked. I chuckled and said, "Just between us, She slept in my bed last night. This morning we admitted to each other that we were in love. Judy got emotional, so I said I would let her go and talk to her later. The coffee pot was almost ready, so I cleaned the urn and put hot water in it and our cups to warm them up. I had just finished that when the doorbell rang. It was FedEx with a special delivery from my lawyer. It was my divorce certificate. The court had waived the waiting period because of the extenuating circumstances. I was a free man. Barbara was coming downstairs. Her face glowed with contentment. Her cell phone rang, so she answered it. Within seconds, she burst out laughing. After a few, she ended the call. That was Judy. She said she had a question for me. Oh, and what was that? I asked. She asked if it was okay if she started calling me Mom. She replied before giving me another kiss. You just had to tell her, didn't you? I laughed. Barb said I had to tell her that I had to make the first move because you never would. She was right. I had saw myself as too old to be in love again. I poured us both our morning coffee and walked over to the kitchen table after mixing mine the way I liked it. Barb liked hers black, so after grabbing her cup, she headed over towards me, but stopped when she saw the letter from my lawyer. Picking it up, she read it. The second page was the certificate. She looked at me with tears of joy. I got up and held her in my arms. Is it time for you to meet my parents? She asked. When I said yes, she called her mother to ask her if they still did the family get-together on the family farm during Labor Day weekend. When she said yes, she told her that she would be coming home for it. Her mother was thrilled. Instead of doing it, she explained on the Monday they would be doing it on Saturday because others had plans for that Monday. Judy and Joanne were both out before the end of summer. We spent one day just going through their binders. Both daughters and Barb were surprised how much I had on my daughter's life. We flew into Cuyahoga County Airport where we had a car rental waiting in a small private jet. Then with our luggage we went and booked ourselves into a Holiday Inn. It was a beautiful September day. The plane was booked to pick us up the following Tuesday. Barb hadn't been home in 2 years, but had warned me that both her father and 2 brothers had been in the service. Since I was the first man in her adult life she was bringing home, I would sure to be grilled to make sure I was good enough for their only daughter. When we left the inn the next morning, she drove us to the farm. We were early, I figured, because we were the third vehicle in the yard. Her mother ran out of the porch eager to greet us before we had shut off the car. She was in shock. Her only daughter was with a man. Her father, hearing the voices, came out to see what the fuss was about. I was shocked. Her father was Bullfrog Patterson, my old drill sergeant. The first words out of his mouth was, well, shit. I had thought, like all the new recruits, that he was nothing but an a-hole. Barb, what are you doing with this chicken? He cost me over $1,000, he said with a laugh while holding his hand out to me. I was supposed to break him and get him to drop out. So, I threw all the shit I could think of at him, and he excelled despite me becoming one of the best damn Marines I've ever trained. That man, when he must be, is as hard as a rock. He cost me $1,000 in bets because I never thought he'd last. He proved me the hard way that I was wrong. Bullfrog, I said as Barb and her mom looked at me surprised. I won't pull any punches. I came to have a man-to-man talk with Barbara's father because I wanted to ask him for his daughter's hand. I had no clue that he was you. Are you serious? Mrs. Patterson asked. Yes, ma'am, I replied firmly, noticing that Bull had a smile a mile wide. You got it, John, was his only reply. My only daughter couldn't come home with a better man. With that said, I got down on one knee and pulled the ring box out of my pocket. In front of her parents, I asked her to marry me. Barb, completely surprised, said yes. So, I stood up and slid the ring on, praying it would fit. It did. Then I gave her a big kiss. After congratulations and a great big warm welcome to the family hug by her mom and dad, Bull said, let me get the keys to the truck, and we will go a quick beer run. It will give us a chance to talk. Barb's mom was bawling for 2 reasons. Her daughter had come home with a man that her father approved of and had got engaged right on the spot. Bull's and my first stop were the local Legion to have a couple of drafts. He asked if I had gotten the divorce, and I said I had. I explained how I had met his daughter and how we came to be. He knew I had come from money, so had no need to ask. Of course, he had to introduce me to everyone and explain quite proudly that I was his future son-in-law. Someone asked me how he got the name Bullfrog. I said, let me explain. He was our drill sergeant for basic training, and it was his job to weed us out. Since I had joined at the age of 16 with my parents' approval, he felt that I really did not want to be there. He came down on me as hard as he could. Every little screw up by me meant an extra something being added on me by him. My fellow recruits knew it and wondered why. One night in the barracks, one of the guys said, "Man, you are taking the shit big time. What do you think of him?" I said, "Well, he reminds me of a bullfrog sitting on a log trying to catch bugs. The problem is that in his eyes, I'm the bug." The guys loved it and started calling him Bullfrog, and it stuck. We dropped a couple hundred, picking up the beer and rye. I knew if he had his way, I was going to be so drunk by the end of the day that I would not be able to drive. By the time we got back, the yard was full of cars. We took some of the beer and rye into the house, then drove his truck around the house and parked it to use the beer as needed. Barb and her mom were there to greet us. Barb slid his hand into mine. A voice in the crowd yelled, "Son of a bitch, hard hat Charlie, is that you?" I looked up and said, "Measly Mike. Old dog, how in the hell are you? Man, it's good to see you, brother." Within seconds, we were giving each other a big brotherly hug. We both knew instantly we were still good buds. Bull looked at us and said, "You know each other?" "He's the best tech man I ever had underneath me," I replied with a big grin. Bullfrog had trained me, and I didn't know that he was Barbara's dad. Bull said, "John, why did he call you Hard Hat Charlie?" When I re-enlisted, I started using my second name and made it to a major before I was discharged. I replied, "I got that name from my SEAL team on what would end up being my last mission. So, you're the hardest Charlie that saved my son's life." He summed up. Mike and I both said yes. Barb walked up and stood beside me and whistled to get everyone's attention. She introduced me to all as her boyfriend, then said, "My mother has got something to say before we carry on with this party." Turning to me, she whispered, "I'm keeping the keys because if I know my dad and brother, you're going to be too goddamn drunk to drive." Barb's mom, Gloria, spoke. "I wish to officially announce the engagement of my only daughter, Barbara, to retired Major Jonathan Charles Barnes. She came home because Charles wanted our approval before he asked our daughter. My husband trained him and said he was one of the best he ever had. It took at the most 20 seconds for him to give his blessing. As soon as he got it, he got down and proposed right in front of us. Everybody seemed stunned, but Mike said, 'You're going to be my brother-in-law,' and repeated it as if he was trying to convince himself that it was true. For the next hour, Barb introduced to me her extended family. Barb admitted to me it had been a long time since she had seen her family look so proud. By the way, she was right, they got me drunk. I don't know how we made it back to the hotel. Hell, I did not remember half the night. I had to ask my future wife-to-be if I had made a fool of myself. She summed it up by saying, "You outlasted the other two idiots." That didn't impress me much as I struggled to get out of bed. Man, I was feeling rough. Barb said it served me right. I swore to myself that it would be the last time. During breakfast, Barb took an image of her ring on a whim using her cell and texted Judy, sending her the picture as an attachment. She texted, "You can call me Mom if you agree to be my maid of honor." Less than 10 minutes later, we were on a conference call. Barb and I and my 3 very excited daughters. They were all thrilled. We learned James and Joan were dealing with the FBI on multiple levels and facing various possible charges. Their defense bills were climbing. Both of their careers were destroyed. James had DNA tests done on his 3 sons and found that they were all his. I guess with all he was going through and had done, it had created doubts in his own mind. It looked like their marriage may have been strained to its limit. My 3 daughters felt it would be lucky to last another year. The money that paid it for it all had been traced back to James, who, with legal authority given to him after my faked death by Joan, had it paid for it via the trust. It proved that their plans had been started long before I caught them. Little did we know that in his warped mind, everything happening to him was my fault. He still claimed he was been framed. Most thought he had lost all credibility. My trust, which had still not been settled, was worth millions now, and the lawyers would be fighting over it for months. I told them the court had put into the hand of a trustee until settlement came. The only problem we were facing right now was that my 3 daughters wanted us to fly to New York for a family celebration. We ended up agreeing to come as soon as Barb's work schedule would allow it. All the girls were pushing for a date. I worked it out with the board with my future bride's approval to accept the position of CEO. Meetings would be held on the 2nd and 4th Friday of each month and secured conference calls 3 days a week. I wanted to limit my time away from Barb, She had become my world. Barb started her first day at the hospital and soon fit right in. Working in the ER in a small town allowed a lot of free time at times, so she began taking courses to further her career. She worked 4 12-hour days one week and 3 the next. Her hours were from 6 to 6, so I would be sure to have meals ready to serve by the time she came home. Our friends got a hoot out of how domesticated I was becoming. It made me wonder if they had ever had a clue about a bachelor's life. After her first 3 weeks, we flew out that Thursday night to New York, so I could attend a press conference the following morning to announce my assuming my position on the board. It was after that media event I learned that the court had ruled because of all the changes made to my trust were made after the report of my false death were made illegally. The court ruled that I would have to pay James and Joan 19% of its current value, and if they wanted any of the personal property, they would have to buy it back at market value if I agreed to sell it. It was a huge blow for them. I instructed my lawyers to work out the details of the split, providing they got to keep their family home. After the conference, Barb and I went home to my parents where we learned my 3 daughters and Stephen would be joining us on Saturday. Mom and Dad wanted their own version of welcome to the family. Although she had the staff, she cooked the meals. Barb and I had one big problem we had to solve: where we would get married and how we could satisfy our friends and family. By the end of the day, with my parents' help, we decided to get married in Ohio, have a second reception back here with family and their friends, and a get-together with the crew back home after it was all done. I would ask Barb's brother Measly Mike to be my best man. Judy was Barb's maid of honor Jen, and Joe would be the ladies-in-waiting. Stephen and her other brother would finish out the wedding party. We set the date for the last Saturday in December because it had always been Barb's wish to be a December bride. We had just finished a delicious family dinner made by my mom when there was a knock at the front door. When my dad returned from answering it, we got a big surprise. It was my former wife asking to talk to me. My gut told me no way. So did my parents. Barb said, "You must forgive her before you'll be free from the past." Connie told me about her affair and how your wisdom won them both over. It's time you applied your own wisdom to yourself. I went to Dad's office for a few before calling Joan in. "Joan," I said, "before we begin, I want you to hear the last words I heard from you years ago. I was sitting in the judge's office when he talked to you. Pay attention to the tone of your voice and what you said back then. Just so you know, I just emailed a statement to CNN confirming that I was there when the judge recorded it and listened to the conversation via speakers while you two were talking." Joan's face went white. She now understood that I knew the whole truth. The mass media had never played the whole chat. I excused myself to get a strong drink so that she could have the privacy to hear her own words as I heard them that fateful day. I came back with a scotch and water, listening outside of the door until the conversation between the judge and her was done before going back into Dad's office. Imagine, if you can, that conversation from my side as I listened to you deliberately write me out of my daughters' lives. Try to see from my view the cheating, the hurt, the pain, and the tears. Consider the price we all had to pay because you became my older brother's high-class 304. I have asked many times what James did during the 3 years he lived with us besides screwing you behind my back. What was it you famously told our daughter? That the story about their dad's death was sad but true, but we can be thankful because it brought Uncle James to all of you. I said coldly with a firm voice. Did you ever say anything in our relationship that was 100% true? Jennifer, Judy, and Joe and have all heard the same thing. They have all even seen the date it was recorded and know it was before my reported death. The result is they are now questioning everything James and you ever said to them. Their listening to that tape has destroyed forever any trust they had for the two of you for good. I told her. Time appears to have proven that I was nothing more to James and you than a tool for you to use to an end. When Jennifer found me, I knew I could not be the walking dead anymore. It was time for me to reclaim my name, my family, and my life. The family's secrets had to end. I stated. Joan looked shell-shocked. My words had torn her apart like arrows of steel. Everything I said pointed right at her and my brother. The tears were now flowing like a soft spring rain. I had to wonder if it was caused by remorse or the shame of being caught. I got up from behind my dad's desk, handing her a box of tissues. Taking my drink in my hand, I left, saying I would leave her so she could gather her thoughts. Barb and my parents were in the living room when I walked in. My mom was showing Barb all the photos she had collected over the years. "By the looks of your face, I can guess it's not going well," my father said. Well, she heard her own words to the judge and his response. Before I gave her a chance to speak, I told to Image how I must have felt considering I was listening to the conversation on his speakerphone at the time. I asked her a few questions and she lost it, so I'm giving her time to collect her thoughts before we talk. I told her that her daughters had heard it all too and saw that the conversation had taken place days before my reported death. I pointed out that her own words had destroyed any trust her daughters had in both. I came out because I did not want to watch her tears. I replied, "She can no longer deny her own past or her lies." "Are you okay?" Barb asked me in genuine concern. "Just stating the facts." I said, "It has given me an inner peace I have not felt in a long time. The rage, the anger I once had is gone. I can now accept whatever happens to come." "It looks like Barb was right then," said Mom. After refilling my drink, I walked back into the office and sat down. Lighting a cigarette, I waited for her to begin. "We saw you catching us as the brass ring. Finally, we would get what we had always dreamed. The chance to live our lives beyond the closed doors." When the judge called, James was in the kitchen with me. We both saw him interfering in what was not his business. His anger and rage drove my thoughts and my response. I really had not given my comments much thought. Jones said softly, "You know, the judge was right. Your father had been texted the video I took before the judge called him. Your father asked us to do nothing until he got there. Within the hour, he was in his plane flying down. When he heard the conversation, he himself went into shock. They both felt as I did, that you both had set everyone up. If it came out their careers were over, their reputations damaged beyond repair. When Jennifer heard it, she demanded we get our DNA tested to verify that what we believed was true. Thankfully, she was my biological daughter. Both would have killed both of you if it would have been legal." I replied, "Your comments made it clear that everything you two were doing was deliberate. Now you know why till this day your own father has had little to do with you. He told the whole family when he went home what had to be done and why. The question I have is, what gave you the right to write me out of our children's life? I have to ask because our daughters want to know," I said as I stood up because her tears were again starting to flow, and walked out. "What are your thoughts so far?" Barb asked. "She's trying to justify her actions, nothing more, nothing less. She has shown no remorse. Hasn't apologized. I feel the only thing she is sorry for is the fact that it has all come out." I said, "Just looking at the three of them told me all I needed to know. They were as shocked as I was. We were all trying to figure out why she had come. We are both looking at doing time." Jones said when I came back into the room, "The FBI has got us on charges of lying to them at least, tax evasion, faking a death, theft, and a couple more, all involving your trust. Our lawyers are trying to work out a plea deal as we speak before we're officially charged. James and I both feel if you spoke up, they might not be as harsh. Sadly, to this point they have not asked me a word. Why would they? I was in the forces overseas fighting for our freedom, while others played their games." I said with a smile on my face, "I really can't help you, can I? You made your bed, you lie in it. This is James and yours mess. I have often asked myself if you were ever really in love with me. I now know. You weren't. I guess you'll finally learn the hard way that there are consequences for your conduct that money can't buy you out of. You haven't changed. I had hope of you apologizing for what you had done, but you didn't. You came to try to save your own skin. It's always been about you and what you wanted, so please allow me the pleasure of escorting you out. I guess you'll both go to jail claiming it's not your fault." I could not stop laughing as she left the house. Mom and Dad were being just that, Barb, and I had to sleep in separate beds. It made me realize just how attached Barb and I had become. There is nothing like the warmth of a body next to you in the middle of the night from a loved one that can calm a troubled soul. It was a night of tossing and turning. It made me appreciate just how much we had become one. It was about 2 when Barb sneaked into my room. When she said I couldn't sleep without you, it brought a smile to my face. I responded, "It's moments like this that make us feel young." As she climbed in beside me, I drew her into my arms. When she saw the tears in my eyes, she had to ask me why. I responded I finally understood what it meant to have a loving wife. It became a memory we would share and cherish the rest of our lives. I guess my words hit home because Barb started to cry. I calmed her down with gentle kisses. I need to know right now, she asked. How do you feel about us having kids? I paused before speaking, then said, kids have a unique way of keeping the old young at heart. If you can accept the fact that I will be in my 60s before the last of our brood is out of the house, I see no problem if we have more than one. I guess it's time we started working on one, she said, and we did. Dad was already up when I went down. The whole bottom floor had the smell of fresh perked coffee in the air. It brought back memories of my childhood to mind. It had always been his routine to perk coffee when he was off. I had to agree coffee made like that was richer, more favorable than today's drip stuff. Good morning, Dad said as I walked in to get a cup and join him at the table. I want to thank Barb and you for ruining a good night's sleep. What? Was my reply. Your mom had to wake me up when Barb slipped your room to ask me what I thought we should do. He laughed. I told her that you were both old enough to know what you were doing. I'm going to enjoy teasing her about it for weeks. Tell Mom that. Barb and I really don't sleep well when we're apart. We learned that thanks to her last night. I replied. And let her know we're planning for her to have a couple more grandkids within a couple of years. Barb wants them close because of her age. Dad commented. I guess we will be looking for a home in Spuzum. With me semi-retiring, your mother will want to spend a lot of time being a grandmother again. Jennifer and Steve were the first to show up. Barb and I hadn't seen them since their wedding, and it gave us a chance to catch up. They both were tickled pink to be part of our bridal party. They told us about what they did on their honeymoon. Barb explained what happened when I met her parents, making sure to mention that I was a happy drunk, then embarrassed me by showing them all a video clip of her father, brother, and I singing a barrack song drunk. The girls roared over that one. Even my dad cracked a smile. Steve got a kick out of the fact that Barb's dad had been my drill sergeant and her brother on of my grunts. Judy and Joanne showed up about an hour later. Judy went over the moon when Barb asked her to be our maid of honor. Until then, she hadn't taken it seriously. They spent quite a while catching up with all the gossip from where she used to work and their mutual friends. Mom had to brag in joy about our plans to have children. Then, of course, Jennifer had to tell her sisters about my famous video, so of course, I ended up getting teased a lot about that. Steve got Barb to send him a copy so he could forward it to his dad. Barb said, let them know that we're engaged, she said. With the building of the addition and her new job, we had been so busy, we haven't seen them since the first of the month. It should be finished by the end of the month. She explained that it was a 4-bay garage with a huge separate storage section behind and a 3-bedroom apartment above. We have a fully enclosed walkway to the mudroom that will be attached to the house. It took them a week to level off the area before they could build. At the same time, we doubled the size of our leveled backyard and enlarged the patio. We hope to have it stained and sealed to match the house if the weather holds out. The excess soil and rock we removed was used to expand the level area in the front. It was then that I broke the news to my daughter that I had talked to their mother last night. They all became quiet. Using Dad's internet and Barb's laptop, I played the audio clip of our chat through Dad's TV. I watched as they listened in earnest to the judges and Joan, then her and my conversation. Afterwards, I could tell my daughters were stunned. I don't believe it. There was no explanation, no guilt or remorse. Yet she came expecting you to bail them out because she felt you owed them. Joanne said, you asked her questions which she completely ignored. It's sad that she's so self-centered that she cannot see what her own conduct has done, Dad. Joanne said, in her world it appears that it is all about her. Was she always like that? I thought for a few, then said, before the birth of the 3 of you, I would have to say no. I remember my first leave home after your birth. Even though I was only home for 3 months, I could tell that something about her had changed. I wrote it off at first as her being overstressed, tired and worn out because the 3 of you were a handful at times. That was when I hired your first full-time nanny and decided to leave the army so I could be home to help her with you all. By the time I got out, you were almost 3. We were strangers to each other, but soon she started to warm up. Now I see that for her it was all a front. During that year, James had moved in and had gotten a job. He started his civilian life, and I, with Dad's help, started building my company. I guess that my relationship with her during that time was just a facade she hid behind as she built her future with him. That is why I asked her if she had ever been truthful to me. I said truthfully. It sounds like she had a mental breakdown caused by extreme depression after our birth that she never got help for. Judy said, Both Barb and I have seen that quite often in our line of work. One of the classic symptoms is a personality change its way the mind helps them to cope. That may explain what happened, but not her actions. Sad to say, after all that has been done, this the final straw. My mother and are done. Both of her sisters agreed. I thought this is just something else she can blame me for. I didn't know at that time how accurate that would turn out to be. To change the mood, Barb decided to get the ladies to help her choose the color of their dresses. I butted in, saying I would be wearing black. When I got asked why, I said because black is the color for those grieving because of a loss. Jennifer's had to ask what I would be losing. I said my freedom. That got a big groan. My dad saw me grab a beer and head outside to try to work out my thoughts. He knew I had a lot on my mind. So, he joined me. Son, I know it hard to face. Don't try to second-guess yourself and what you did. You make the best decisions for all of us at that time based on what you knew. There is no good in looking back. Life is just too short. Count you blessing. 3 beautiful daughters who make their grandfathers very proud. They carry your morals, principles, and standards well. A future wife who has a heart of gold. My father and mother split their estate between me and you while riding James out. You served your country and saved many lives. You took the high road always in your walk in life, even though you for a while lost it all. Today you stand tall and proud, free to live your life as you see fit. He explained. Your daughters just wrote their mother out of their lives. They made hard choices just like you. My dad said with wisdom. With the same knowledge. That should tell you that what you did was not wrong. It was your conduct and your conduct alone that brought your daughters home. They understand that regardless of the cost, you did what you did for the benefit of us all. That says it all. My dad had always been able to find a way to make me feel proud. His intelligent words seemed to always get me out of the fog, allowing me to have a clear vision. Just think, you may end up with grandchildren older than their uncle and aunts, he added with a laugh. Not many get a second change to do it better a second time. Focus yourself on what's coming and leave the crumbs of your past behind. With a smile on my face, we walked back in and joined the rest of the family as they continued the planning of my wedding. Barb, my mom, and 3 daughters were now dealing with what type of flowers and why. Would it be a church service or just a justice of the peace? Would it have a Christmas theme? I shook my head. So Dad and I spent the rest of the afternoon playing crib for a penny a point double for skunks. I ended up losing $4.65. Let them go at it, he said, and just show up at the wedding. It's the easiest way to stay out of trouble. He was right. On Sunday, before we left, my mother had Barb call her mother to inform them that we would be getting married there. She was thrilled. Barb also made it clear that her future mother-in-law wanted to be involved in the organization of things. Dad heard my mom say on the phone, saying, "Don't worry about the cost, it's my husband and I wedding present to these two," and rolled his eyes. The 2 mothers argued about it, but my mother won out. When she put her foot down, there was no other way. Ever since her teenage years, her closed female friends had always called her Sarge. They did agree that everything had to be approved by Barb. It reinforced in my mind I was marrying my mom's replica because Barb was the same way. The way things were coming together made me question whether Joan and I had really been in love. As we flew home, Barb mentioned her parents were flying out. Mom wanted to discuss some locations, what to have on the menu, which band to hire, and whatever else she could think of to make it more complicated. They wanted to see what kind of life we lead daily. We didn't even have to pick them up. Bull was renting a truck so they could do day trips from our house as they toured the island. It was something he had always wanted to do, and now they had the chance. Just over 2 months until the wedding time was catching up to us fast. We returned home to find the dive had burned down, so Tuesday morning found me sitting with the owner. He had no insurance and was not going to rebuild. I offered him fair market value for the property, and we negotiated his liquor license until we worked out a deal provided the local council would approve. Within 3 days, the mayor provided the approval. By the end of the week, they began construction on the site. The contractors and builders were excited. They were building a back-to-back restaurant and bar, taking a city block using in part more logs from the mill. With a concrete floor, the 2 businesses sharing a common interior wall, everyone was impressed. Using plans approved by the village, they said they would have the outside completed in 2 weeks. Former staff agreed to work in the bar and were thrilled by its new name, Bullfrogs. Using the nearest real estate agent, we had the restaurant space leased before they were done. I hired a firm out of Seattle to design the layout of the bar and to set it up. I paid extra to have it done on a rush. I got Barb to have her mother scan her favorite picture of Bull in uniform and email it to us. I used that image to have a glass company design the main entrance glass doors with his full image sketched on each door. In front of his waist on each door was the bar's name. Barb had ordered the furniture for the new apartment. During the month, her and our moms had pretty much settled everything about the wedding. The day before her parents arrived, everything was done. That Thursday night, the new bar had its grand opening. It was more successful than the old one had ever been. Everyone raved about our bar food menu. It made Barb smile because she had planned out the items, giving them their unique names. We had 31 days till the wedding. Barb's parents would arrive around 5 that Friday night, so I was surprised to find out that morning that Barb wanted me to drive her over to the regional airport in Port, insisting we drive the Jeep. We had to be there at 2. I asked her why. She said it was a surprise. We got inside the airport at 10 to 2 in the afternoon and watched a small 6-seater jet fly in. I learned a new thing. I did not know that my dad flew his own plane. They both looked great. We had gotten my parents settled in and were sharing beers when Barb's parents arrived. After getting them settled, it was too late to start dinner, so we drove them down to our new bar. I took Barb's parents in my old Ford truck and let him drive. My future mother-in-law said my truck reminded her of his truck when they were first dating. Barb followed us in the Jeep, which had become her pride and joy. When we got to the bar, boy was Bull surprised. Seeing his full image on the main doors twice blew him away. My dad, standing beside me, whispered softly, "Well done." I said, "Bull, when you walk in, I want you to scream the order like you did when you wanted us recruits in formation." He said okay to humor me and did. Walking in after opening the door, he let loose with his order in a roar, as if we were all standing there in front of him. 16 former Marines quickly fell into formation and saluted him one more time. He had trained every one of them. He walked down the line and shook their hands, greeting them one by one with their full names. Gloria looked at me with her face glowing in pride and said, "You know you will have to carry him home." I nodded and laughed. Barb kissed me and said, "I love you," then told her mother that she had no idea that I had named our new bar after her dad. Charlie had refused to tell me because he wanted it to be a surprise. Bull lost when he saw the plague on the wall above the bar. It said, "Named after the toughest drill sergeant of them all, Bullfrog Patterson." We all tried Barb's menu that night and agreed for a bar. The food was great. Dad and I had to carry Bull up the stairs to his bed. His former recruits got him piss-eyed drunk. It would be discussed for weeks how much nicer he was when he wasn't in command. Bull would say for years it was the second time in his life he'd been shocked and awed. The first was when I asked for his daughter's hand. Gloria, my parents, and us were relaxing in the living room, reflecting on the day's events when she dropped the news. Bull was being pushed into retirement after 40 years of service and was at a crossroad in his life. Mike was taking over the family farm at the end of the year, and they were planning to move into town. Bull was taking it hard. He still had too much piss and vinegar in him to retire. I looked into Barb's eyes and saw her growing concern. "You know, Barb," I said, "if he lived here, he would be the perfect choice to manage the bar." Gloria said, "But where would we live? There's not much available." "Mom," Barb said with a huge smile, "we have the in-law suite. If Dad will go for it, it's yours. I should warn you, though, the thunderstorms here can be loud and wild." Her mom looked at her and said, "How do you manage them? Ever since you were a small child, when we had a bad storm, you would crawl into our bed." A smile came across Barb's face as she looked at me in her knowing way. "Charlie has helped me make them one of my favorite things," she said with a huge grin. My parents caught the inner meaning and both started to laugh. Over the next few days, as Gloria and Bull toured the island, my parents, John and Silva, spent their time looking for a new residence. We still had not disclosed to Bull our plans. Gloria wanted to see how he saw the area before we made the official offer to him. The furniture finally arrived. Barb and I were busy unpacking it and setting it all out when Barb noticed an official-looking car coming around the last curve in the driveway. So, we both went out to meet it. It was the FBI looking for me. They wanted to talk to me alone, but I made it clear since I had nothing to hide from my future wife, I would prefer to talk with her there. So, we found ourselves sitting at the kitchen table sharing a coffee. The agent, who had identified himself as a Peter McCormick, had some troubling news. There had been 2 arrests last week. My brother James was under arrest for fraud. tax evasion, falsifying a death, attempted murder, theft, my trust, and third-degree assault on his wife. He had been denied bail. Joan had filed for divorce and was facing a bunch of charges herself, but had been granted bail because of their kids. The problem was that an informer had come forward to disclose that James had been trying to get information about who could be hired to do a contract kill and may have succeed. They wanted my schedule and plans for the next 2 months while the situation was being investigated. I noticed Barb's face turn white. They were taking it seriously because the trust had a clause that said if I got divorced and died within 6 months of the date, my trust would be controlled by my former wife. Lawyers had agreed that until the trust was split and approved by the court, I could not legally change anything in it. Agents had been assigned to the area to investigate things on this end. They made it clear that I could not change my daily agenda in any way. Barb and I understood they were taking the matter very serious. After they left, we sat and discussed how we were going to break it to my parents and what steps could we take to protect ourselves. It was the last Saturday the 6 of us would be together until the wedding. My parents had found a 5-acre lot outside of Port and had finalized the deal. Their real estate agent had linked them to a local contractor who had agreed to build them a log home a bit bigger than ours on a 4-foot crawl space. They had ordered a custom kit online. It would be delivered to the building site in 3 weeks. Bud was not looking forward to heading back home. He had found the slower pace of our small town living inviting. Barb, her parents, and I were sitting in the living room. My parents were out. I asked him, "Bud, how much will you be taking from the farm when you move to town?" He answered, "We really haven't given it much thought. Honestly, I don't like the thought of having neighbors 200 yards next to me." "Why?" "Dad," Barb said, "Charlie and I were wondering if you would consider moving here and managing the bar for us. You both could live in the in-law suite rent-free. The salary would start at $60,000 a year." To say he was shocked would be understating it, but he promised to think about it. We told him to take his time and let us know when he decided. Gloria later told her daughter she thought it was a done deal because Bull was very proud of that bar. He just must accept in his mind what was already in his heart. So, they talked about what Gloria wanted to bring with her as they worked in the kitchen preparing a big dinner. The 4 of us watched them drive off, heading back to Ohio. As we headed back into the house, I told my parents we needed to talk. It broke my mother's heart when I told them about the FBI's stop. She blamed herself for not raising James right. I gave her the advice the judge had given me and pointed out that he had led a good life until he got involved with my former wife. "Remember, Mom, you taught us to associate with those who would build us up, not take us down. It's standing for my morals and principles that you raised us with that have kept me balanced and strong. They were what made me the man I am." James just threw away his, "Well, Mom and Dad," Barb said, "I got some good news that may cheer you up, but you have to promise me that you will keep it to yourselves." I looked at Barb with a puzzled look, wondering what she had to say. My parents said that they would agree. "My doctor figures by the time we get married, I will only have 32 weeks to go," Barb said with glee. "If it's a girl, it will be Gloria Elizabeth, a boy Jonathan Charles Barnes IV. I thought my mother would scream. I almost fainted. So here it was a day before my wedding. Bullfrog, Measly Mike, my dad, and all the rest of the males of my bridal party, after going through the rehearsal, were in the Legion sharing a few drinks. The females were all somewhere else throwing Barb a bridal party. Bull was saying goodbye to a lot of his friends and getting a lot of rubbing their noses in its in. He was leaving Ohio and moving to Washington State to manage a bar named after him. James' plan had been foiled. The contractor for the kill caught. After pleading guilty, he got a hard 20. Joan had got a deal for time served and a 5-year parole by agreeing to testify against her husband. His trial would start in the new year. The trust had been settled. Joan had put the estate she lived in with her 3 sons up for sale and had filed for divorce. The last 2 of our 4 children start kindergarten next month. Jonathan came first, Gloria 10 months after, and then the twins Silva and Wilford, Bullfrog's real name. Jennifer and Stephen have a boy and a girl. Judy married a Marine from Maine who works in corporation under me. Joanne married Measly Mike. They opened a Bullfrog's bar near the farm. Life is better the second time around. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.